I think that this is the best the best way to address a very complex issue as migration. So without any more comments, thank you so much on behalf of UNAM Los Angeles and UNAM in Mexico and the CISAN also. Okay, they are jumping in. So no comments regarding the procedures? So
the only thing is I have to leave by 1:45.
It's okay.
On the dot.
Okay.
On the dot because of some other commitment. Thank you.
It's okay.
Well, I think we.
Hello, everyone. Here from Los Angeles. Just to let you know that you are welcome to start the conference presentation whenever you feel
okay,
like.
Let me just say something. We have a special guests that are joining in like the room, but most of the audience will be following us on the YouTube from UNAM Los Angeles. Okay. Welcome, everyone, every one of you. And on behalf of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, in our headquarters in Los Angeles, California, and also on behalf of the Center for Research on North America from the same university in Mexico, but in the Mexico City campus, we welcome you all in this occasion because for us, it is a day to celebrate. We are going to celebrate the launching of a new book that is co-edited by UNAM Los Angeles and also the Center for Research on North America in Mexico City in an effort to explore new ways to communicate what basically scholars from Mexico and the United States are doing in different issues, in this case, migration, basically, within the United States. But it is an honor, especially for UNAM Los Angeles, because this is precisely the first co-edited publication that we are launching. And so it is an honor for me to having had this possibility to work with Camelia and Monica Berea. And also I would like to mention that Professor Graciela Martinez Salce, who is the current director of the Center for Research on North America, is sending you all the best regards. And also she wants me to say thank you because she cannot be with us. She's in another meeting with the counselor of UNAM in Mexico City. But anyway, she's so enthusiastic about this possibility of continuing working together. So let me tell you that we, as you all know, we are going to talk about the characteristics and a little bit about the history, how this book was created by the two editors that are joining us today. The book, you know, it deals with the Trump legacy in migration policy and also post-pandemic challenges for the Biden administration. I am absolutely convinced that this book is a just-in-time publication, and that we have 4 amazing women. I mean, in Switzerland, so in the evening, but in Mexico and in America, I think it's early morning. So we have 4 amazing women, which I congratulate myself to be with you all. All of you are very prestigious international scholars, and I just want to say that the book is divided basically in 2 different parts. It has a total of 6 chapters and a total of 8 qualified voices that participated in writing each one of these different chapters. They are giving us ideas and arguments in order to debate the current challenges of the United States, challenges that you know are truly overwhelming, and it'll be very interesting to hear what each one of you has to say regarding this. So without any more comments, let me just start by introducing Professor Mónica Berea. Professor Mónica Berea is the former director, but also the founding director of the Center for Research on North America at the National Autonomous University in Mexico. She's considered one of the top scholars in Mexico and in North America regarding migration, migration flows, immigration policy, migration and gender, but also xenophobic attitudes, and of course, US-Mexico relations. Professor Mónica Berea has been a distinguished member of many boards, international boards, such as the Mexico Institute from the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington. And also she participates as advisor of the Mexican Immigration Authority. So Mónica, please, the floor is yours, and it is an honor for me to present you, to introduce you to our friends and colleagues.
Thank you very much, Silvia. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you, UNAM Los Angeles, for having co-edited our book, and the Global Research Forum on Diasporas to have organized this book presentation of the Trump's legacy in migration policy and post-pandemic challenges for Biden. Well, the original idea to carry out this project by Camelia and myself was to put together a series of essays to form a collective book that precisely reflects the substantive changes that US immigration policy undergone during the Trump era and the changes, actions, initiatives, and policies that have been proposed and implemented during Biden administration under different perspectives and disciplines. And we think we got a very interesting book. This product represents a follow-up of several former projects. The first one was published at the beginning of the last decade called Anti-Immigrant Sentiments, Actions and Policies in the North American Region and the European Union, as well as Migration in Turbulent Times, that was published as a collective essays in a special issue of the periodical publication of Migration Issues by Oxford University. In that moment, I was highly preoccupied about the growing number of foreign residents and undocumented migrants in certain societies, which made them aware of who and how they were made as a society. During this century, societies have increasingly become more aware of the otherness, perceiving the migratory flows negatively, and some of them exerted pressure to policymakers in order to adopt highly restrictive measures to control these flows. This has been one of the reasons why the emergence of multiple and growing aggressive and intolerant xenophobic movements against unauthorized migrants created an anti-immigrant environment which emerged worldwide that has been more vehement than in the past, and that has resulted in the proliferation and imposition of highly restrictive immigration policies at the federal and local levels in various countries. Also, it was our interest to analyze the increase of nationalist movements who emerged with great force in the United States and some European countries, who felt threatened by the invasion of other cultures. In fact, many ultra-conservative political groups were promoting nationalist and xenophobic ideas and policies in the reparation agenda. Just as the Gypsies have been pointed out by Italians and French as people susceptible of being criminals, US anti-immigrant groups also have considered Mexicans as undesirable and possible criminals. And precisely that was how former President Donald Trump managed his presidential campaign, with an anti-immigrant and anti-Mexican stance. He used destructive and violent anti-immigrant rhetoric to justify the unprecedented hardline stance on immigration policy through the establishment of highly punitive directives and federal regulations. His main objective was to enhance border security through the acceleration of apprehensions and deportations in the interior. In fact, he didn't temporarily protected status, suspended DACA, imposed a travel ban mainly for Muslims, limited refugee admissions, established an asylum ban, and restrained legal immigration, among other measures. Furthermore, the COVID-19 pandemic gave him the excuse to separate more families than before, abandon migrants and asylum seekers in Mexican border towns not secure, and the right of asylum through Title 42, who was established by him in order to protect the border. Ordered broad shutdowns of the legal immigration system, blocking permanent and temporary foreign workers into their labor markets, highly needed by their economies, and closing offices that process immigration applications temporarily. Preoccupied by all this harsh policy, I continued this project and published a book called Anti-Immigrant Policies During the Trump Era. In the middle of the terrible COVID pandemic, Biden became president. Since the beginning of his administration, he has had a more positive attitude towards migration. His administration has been trying to reverse or undo the damage caused by Trump's anti-immigrant policies through the signing of several executive orders to reverse them, a difficult task that requires substantial structural changes. Biden has taken constructive steps reversing some of them, but they have been slow and not very visible. The Democrats and their base assumed that Biden had the ability to easily reverse or de-Trumpize the changes established in the immigration system, but this has not been the case, since it has been logistically and politically difficult because the Trumpist bureaucracy has been very difficult to reverse, and the Republicans still use an extremely toxic rhetoric and xenophobic elements in the immigration debate, constructing a highly charged political issue. It is true that Biden mishandled immigration messaging by telling migrants not to come, and at the same time pressed for a more human approach, interpreted by some as a more relaxed border policy. At the same time, large migration movements have been increasing significantly during the last 2 years in the whole world, especially from Latin and Central America, passing through Mexican territory to the United States. It has been registered a notable increase since 2021 in the arrest and apprehensions of single adults and entire families at the US-Mexican border, who are quickly removed and under the Title 42, which Biden has tried to remove without any success. It is true that Mexican flows also have increased significantly, but people coming from Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba have also grown significantly. And of course, Central America have been pushed by the combination of increasing violence, climate change, a terrible pandemic mismanaged especially by the López Obrador government, the tremendous drop in their economies, and foreign and internal investment, among many factors. Camelia and I, which I had the pleasure to work with her, we're very pleased to confirm this project with academics from prestigious universities such as Harvard Immigration and Refugee Program, University of Chicago, Yale Law School, Rice University, Mexa Institute, and universities from London as King College and Universidad de Chile, and of course from UNAM. We hope you enjoyed and find interesting the thoughts and proposals embodied in this book, and will be willing to recommend it to your colleagues and students. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Berea. You have given us many details about the high quality of this book. And so I will turn now the floor to Professor Rack Barduil. She is the current vice president of the Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism, based in India, if I am not mistaken. But she has been, she holds a PhD in economics, and she has been a professor for 32 years and researcher also in very prestigious institutions in Africa and the Caribbean. She has also participated as a senior economist for the United Nations, and her expertise range from development, migration, gender, poverty, and labor. So I appreciate very much that Professor Barduil is here with us. And please now, dear friend, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much for this generous introduction. And thank you, Professor Monica Varela, for giving us a brief yet potent and very instructive background to the project as well as about the book. And I think I've summarized it beautifully in those few words. For those who have already read parts of the book, will find it easier to follow. So thank you so much for that. So at the outset, I would like to congratulate the authors of this book, as well as the editors who are also authors of a couple of chapters for preparing such a comprehensive one-stop book, in the sense that there is a lot of material, not only on the immigration into the US, but also specific programs such as DACA and so on that have been put in place during Obama's time, and then it has been going from changes to changes, and Trump tried to trample the DACA, but didn't succeed. So I think this is a very, very informative, well-researched book, very comprehensive, and it's very interesting. And I think there's a lot to learn in the migration area from this book. So of course, definitely, I highly recommend this book to those who haven't read it. And the book has been written against the backdrop of the various presidential executive orders on immigration going through different presidents over the last several decades. Not that every president that came into power in the US had migration as its main concern. There have been other concerns, economic concerns. For example, in Obama's time, it was a financial crisis, so that took the center stage. Trump made this his main concern, anti-immigration stance, and then put in place certain measures which were not only negative and unwelcoming, but quite damaging in the international arena, because that's really left a very bad impression about the United States, which ironically is a country made of immigrants and yet fighting back against immigrants. This is ironical. So this is basically the book examines how the various executive orders in the case of immigration had to be put in place, because there is no comprehensive immigration policy or reform in the United States. The last one was in the early 90s, or I think 96 or 86. And since then, there have been basically a series of executive orders or executive measures to bring in few changes, tweak few changes here and there. And when the administration changes, either those changes, they stop, or in some cases, they are reversed. So, so this suggests that the negative perceptions of against immigrants and immigration during Trump's time hasn't done good to this country. And secondly, the realities on the ground are very different. The realities on the ground in the United States are that there is need for labor, there is labor shortage. And the demographics suggest that, there is reluctance. The families are shrinking, that is the white American families. And at the same time, there is this generational dynamics where you have very few young people and lots of old people, and that means their needs have to be met through some kind of taxes and so on. So if the workforce is shrinking and the country is getting more older people, some services will either need to be reduced or stopped. So hence there is need for people who can work and contribute to the country. So in the case of Trump, lots of executive orders or measures were put in place. For Biden, while he's trying to reverse, but he's stuck, because he's reversing these in the context of the existing immigration framework. So if the immigration framework is not reformed, no matter what kind of executive measures you bring in place, they will be temporary and then they will go away if there is a new administration. So the question here is, this makes immigration policies unpredictable. And for people to try to come to this country, would they be here for a year or two? Can they bring their families or not? That is in the case of regular pathways. And in the case of irregular, because people have no choice except to come to this country because of the situations they're facing in their own countries, which in fact, in Central America and in Mexico for that matter, is the creation of the United States. The disturbance, political disturbances, economic maladies, ecological disasters, changes in people's traditions and customs, that means the indigenous, all that has created a lot of havoc in these countries to the extent that there is so much, lots of problems, and they have no recourse except to look for outside. And the United States is, they are in the American hemisphere, and this is the American creation. And the answer from America has to come from America. So all this crime, violence, drugs, economic imbalances, political interference, all these are the creations over the years. I'm not saying now during Trump or Biden, but over the years. And the result has been that people are misplaced, displaced, and need to move somewhere where they can find a way to survive. So you have a situation of partisan politics where Republicans want stricter control of the border and Democrats want legislation so that the issue of irregular or undocumented migration is addressed. Now, when you have this partisan politics, it is not easy to have meaningful reform, comprehensive immigration reform. So that is not going to be a near-term possibility. Okay, so this is not going to be a near-term possibility. So I was wondering if chapter 1 or the introduction could have flagged some kind of speculative or imaginary scenarios regarding the prospects for a comprehensive immigration reform. I mean, it's too late, the book is out. I'm just saying for later on, even though you're capturing the first 100 days of the presidency of Trump and Biden, because it has been a tradition. So in that respect, you are probably okay. But I'm saying for reflection and discussion. So what sort of speculative scenarios can we propose or think about or flag where it is possible that US will open up its borders, will create more legal pathways and creative legal pathways, not just employment-based only, short-term with the possibility of extending and with the possibility of giving people the chance, the immigrants, to then settle permanently. Considering also that there is need for elderly care and other kind of workers in the restaurant sector, hotels and childcare, and so on and so forth. This is the reality. And in that reality, what sort of scenarios can one make? And I think the civil society also has an important role to play besides academics. The academic research, more academic research needs to be done to show the positive contribution and the impact that immigrants make and can make given the opportunity. But in the current political atmosphere in the United States, where the debate is just focused on irregular or undocumented migrants and therefore the job of the immigration policy is to see how you can catch and deport them and then just send them away. So if that is the focus, then the meaningful discussion on reforms is unlikely to come about. And this also brings me again to another aspect, which is, again, not within the purview of the book, but I'm just flagging it. the recent summit of the Americas, which was held in June 2022 at the initiative of Biden, has good points. And I think it's good to look at those, that eventually they have discovered that you can't solve this problem single-handedly. You have to bring in your neighbors, you have to bring in other countries. And let's put the heads together. And even if it's the money, but there also has to be cooperation. So migration can never be dealt with without the cooperation of many, many actors. Whether we say whole of the society approach, bringing in all the actors within a society, or whether bringing in more countries, because countries in the hemisphere are also being affected. To say, well, the US will provide some money to assist Ecuador, to assist Costa Rica, to assist Colombia, whoever is hosting these asylum seekers, is not enough, because that is again a temporary thing. So I'm just flagging these things, not expecting that the book should have handled it, but actually the book is giving rise to some of the other areas which could be looked into. So financial assistance will not be adequate, and to say to tackle the root causes, which is a development issue, is a big challenge, and that could take many, many years, which is a starting point. So I would like to see that the measures that were proposed in the declaration of the summit, to what extent they will be implemented, and how we can assess the implementation of those measures. In other words, whether Mexico will continue to provide support to be vigilante at the border, and what will be the attitude. I mean, this is one of the recommendations. The other is the role of the international financial institutions to bring in money to help the countries that are actually facing developmental challenges, addressing poverty, to what extent they will be coming in a big way and doing real work, not just doing consultancies and so on. So I think these are some of the areas which academics will have to face on, some of the challenges to see where they're going, and the civil society to hold the various partners accountable to say, yes, this is what you guys have signed off, and this is where you're going, where is the action? So I think those actionable sort of things, I would very much love to see that this kind of work is followed up. And finally, I have a couple of minutes. And finally, I would have liked to have seen a concluding section in the book, right? I know each of the chapters have some kind of final remarks and so on. Something to put together, again, to flagging. What are it's too late, but maybe for the next project, to say, where does this lead us to? Would this stopgap measure, would these executive actions or executive measures really solve the mammoth challenges of migration and migrants that the region, that the American hemisphere is facing? So how to go, what are the innovative ways? And this is where I think the academics come in, even though they may be hypothetical, so it's to test. And there is the example in Canada, not too far, north of the United States. They have increased the number of legal pathways. 50,000, they hope to get 50,000 a year. Right now, from 25,000, it has gone up to 40,000 people with permanent status who can come and work and create. Not only work for others, but create jobs. And this is one way of creating entrepreneurship. And this is how the United States became what it is today, on the backs, and with the help of the immigrants who brought in different kinds of skills and ingenuity and made a creative society. So I think it will be a unique contribution to look at some of these areas. And in conclusion, yes, more research needs to be done, but it doesn't leave us. There's no answer. In other words, it will still, the irregular migration, whether you put in 50-meter wall or 100-meter wall or 10-meter wall, will not stop. They will continue because the real problem is not tackled. So the real problem that needs to be tackled is then to open up legal pathways in the meantime, whether it's through short-term work contractual or long-term, and then develop those countries where the migrants are coming from. And this will be several pronged strategy, not just border control, because this is managing. What is happening in the US is managing the migration, not governing migration. So if there is no migration governance, I don't think the problem will be solved. So I think what I have to say in concluding again, that this is a fascinating, very interesting book. I read most of it. I must say I didn't read all, but I read most of it. And I found it really engaging, fascinating, scholarly, and at the same time, lots of recommendations which perhaps could be followed up. I think I have exhausted my time. So with that, I would congratulate the authors again and say, what a fantastic job you have done. Good piece of scholarship. Thank you very much. And let's keep civil society, keep pushing for legal pathways, and think of the academics, think of creative ways of doing it, and civil society to see how those could be pushed into practice. So it is like working together. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for giving me this opportunity, and maybe I've taken more time than I should have done that. And I can stay for another 10 minutes and then, sorry, I have to leave that. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Professor Bardouil. You have highlighted many interesting issues regarding the book, but also are giving my colleagues the new ideas in order to keep walking in the right track to explore more issues and in depth in terms of migration. It is truly an anecdote that I was in Los Angeles during the Summit of the Americas, and as I don't know if you know, but the Mexican president didn't participate. He rejected the invitation. So we are always surrounded by many voices and discouraging attitudes that are not helpful in order to have an open conversation and to be more optimistic. Anyway, but this is the right time for our third speaker of this evening. Her name is Professor Niraj Kaushal. She's a great friend of mine. She's also an economist and a journalist. By training, she's an expert in comparative immigration policy and professor of social policy at Columbia University. And also, she has been doing a great job as researcher associate at the Bureau of Economic Research in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at the United States. Niraj has also focused her studies on the rising disaffection towards immigration globally. So welcome, Niraj. Thank you so much for participating with us and come back to Mexico. She's also a member of the Metropolis International Steering Committee. This is the place where we met. And so thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Sylvia. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So let me also start by congratulating Monica Vera and Camelia Tegio for the editors and the authors of the book for this very, very timely book, Trump's Legacy in Immigration Policy and Post-Pandemic Challenges for Biden. I don't, since the book is already out there and it's very well written, I enjoyed it. I don't have any specific comments for the book. I want to use my time to think of American policy, immigration policy, to see what can we learn from the past few years. So I want to look at it from a different perspective. Instead of talking about what damage Trump brought to the United States immigration system, I want to look at it from the other side. I want to say, let's see how he failed in achieving certain things. So let me start before that to say that, US is in dire straits when it comes to immigration, that everybody sitting here knows that. 20 years ago, when I taught students immigration in the US, I proudly said that immigration is an issue where there is a lot of bipartisanship. That bipartisanship is dead. So anything we talk about on immigration in the US, without recognizing that political reality is basically just a scholarly talk instead of having any policy that can actually impact. So that's the first thing. And therefore, that's the reason why I want to actually see how Trump failed. What does it tell us about the agency in the United States that are, even in this kind of an environment, that are supportive of immigration, and how can we move forward beyond that? So why do I say, I often say that when it comes to immigration, Trump's bark was worse than his bite. His bark was very bad, and I will say why I think so, but he did fail in certain ways, to which, as a proponent of immigration, I feel a lot of satisfaction. And I think it tells us, and I'll give you these examples on 4 different aspects: immigration levels, building of the wall, Muslim ban, and deportation. Now, let's start with immigration numbers. No president in the past 7 decades had been more categorical and determined towards restricting immigration in the US than Trump was. He successfully, in 2016, used immigration to rattle Americans to vote for him on the promise that once he becomes president, he will reduce it substantially. And as we can see in this book, Trump cannot be accused for not trying. He tried. He passed more than 400 policy directives to achieve this goal. Yet, legal immigration remained buoyant. The annual flow in the first 3 years of Trump's presidency were 2% higher than the annual flows in the 8 years of Obama presidency. I'm talking about the legal permanent immigration. We all know that unauthorized immigration fell during this period, as did temporary migration. But the trend for that had begun before Trump. And some of it could be because of increased enforcement, but increased enforcement had also started much before Trump. So, and then in 2020, we saw the year of the COVID, we saw immigration numbers substantially decline, really plummeting. Some would argue that Trump enthusiastically used COVID to restrict immigration, and I agree with them. But a substantial number of these 400 plus policy directives were made before 2020. But also, I have to step back and say that international migration travel halted all over the world. We have always been very appreciative that Australia and New Zealand closed their countries completely, and therefore were successful in the initial stages on restricting COVID. China continues to impose this restriction on travel. Many of my students are not able to go back to their countries, to China. So that part, we always have to think, is it Trump or is it COVID? And I don't think I'll ever have an answer to that. Let me now move to Trump's obsession with the border wall. He talked about building a beautiful wall on the US-Mexico border and make Mexico pay for it. And whenever I watch those videos when he had said that, I think of this Sacha Baron Cohen's Borat comedies. I don't know how many of you have seen these comedies, but these are, very vulgar comedies where the main character is a guy called Borat, who's supposed to be an idiot, and he uses very vulgar language, play liberty with facts, and conveys a contrarian viewpoint. So anybody who was watching Trump, and maybe I think I'm in this analogy, I may be actually doing Borat a disfavor, because Trump was actually exaggerating even more. Everybody who watched him thought that he was exaggerating. Nobody believed him. Not even his supporters believed him that he's going to make Mexico pay for the wall. But still, everybody watched it. People like me were infuriated. People who were supporters of his found that funny, excused him for all those things that he was doing. Yet, neither the supporters nor the detractors ever thought that Trump would fail to get Republican Congress to fund the building of the wall. No one thought that US Congress will simply refuse to give him the money. It was the Republican Congress. It was the same Congress that over the last 23 years was supporting the building of enforcement measures, and billions of dollars have been spent on this. Trump was not able to get that money. At the end of it, he just resorted to financial machinations. He moved federal emergency management agency funds, for which he was duly, asked by the courts that he did a wrong thing, and therefore FEMA had to return the money. At the end of it, Trump was able to make only 47 miles of the wall, of the primary wall, and some 33 miles of the, the wall that already existed. And remember, most of the wall was built during Obama's time, and it was funded by, funding by George Bush's administration. So what happened? I mean, I'll always be confused that, Trump has so much support from other agencies. Even if the government was not supporting, why could they not build the wall? And the only conclusion that I get is that he too realizes that the beautiful wall gave him excellent optics for winning elections. It does not reduce immigration from the southern border. Now, coming to Muslim ban, that was right in the first week he announced the Muslim ban. There were travel restrictions for people from 7 countries. The orders were dragged in courts, blocked by judges, denounced by Republicans. Ultimately, several months passed. The administration come back again and again with watered down versions of the initial ban. What do we know about this time is that the civil rights organization did an excellent job in making sure that Trump is not successful in the process. And believe it or not, it was not just the civil rights organization, but officials within the US immigration system. So there were these people who are officials who are in the consulate offices. They wrote a letter to the Secretary of State. And they said that, and I'm quoting from that letter, a policy that closes our doors to 200 million legitimate foreign travelers in the hopes of preventing a small numbers of travelers to harm Americans from using the visa systems will not achieve its aim of making our country safer. So on the one side, we see that ICE had gone beyond what it was allowed to do. We also see, and some of the acts that they did may not actually be legal even by Americans' law. There were other officials who were very supportive of this part, very supportive of not having any ban or any Muslim ban. And that's where the country was caught in its deliberation. Similarly, on internal enforcement or deportations, Trump had not made any secret that he wants to increase deportations, but at the end of it, the number of deportations were lower during his period. And when asked he was really a tough taskmaster. He was always asking ICE and other agencies, why is this not happening? And one of the reports actually says that it's because sanctuary cities are not letting them are making border internal enforcement more difficult. So at the end of it, because of all these things that he really wanted to do, he could not do it. He resorted to some very mean, smaller things. He paid attention to non-immigrant visa, refugee policies, which was really a damaging thing that he did. Refugee flows fell to the lowest levels. He separated children from their parents at the borders. He started looking at H-1B and L-1 visas, right? Make all kinds of problems with that. So that's why I say his bite was not as bad as his bark, but his bark made much, much more damage. He introduced and led with absolute relish an ugly discourse on immigration that humiliated and frightened immigrants. He kind of allowed that this kind of a language is okay. He branded immigrants rapists, terrorists, people from shithole countries. He called COVID-19 a China virus, a flu virus, but that increased racism throughout the country towards Asians. So he blocked DACA. So I'm not saying that he did not damage, but he made much more damage with his language. And he also failed in many ways what he promised. So if I were to address Trump supporters, I have to tell them he didn't do anything for you guys. And therefore, they need to think back. Now, why do I want to talk about these things? Because I want to highlight that there are various agencies in the US system that advocate immigration, NGOs, civil rights organizations. We came through this 4-year period primarily because of them. There are cities and local agencies in many parts of the country that were very supportive of undocumented immigrants. And there are members within the immigration system that has been very, very supportive of immigration. They did not want to follow and implement Trump's rhetoric. Now, I think I may have taken most of my time, so let me just take 1 or 2 minutes talking about what I think. I don't expect much from Biden because of the politics of the country, but 2 things I really want, and I wish and pray for them to happen. One is to provide some kind of legal residency for DACA recipients. Mm-hmm. I think Democrats have to do this, otherwise they have done a great injustice for DACA recipients. The second part is asylum seekers. And I think that's where advocacy has to be, that you need to step away from the border. You have to increase number of visas in the countries of origin. And that has happened, in case of Mexico, that has happened over the years. So Mexican resident visas increased from 500,000 in the mid-1990s to about 1.1 million in 2010 and 1.5 million in 2019. In comparison, for non-immigrant visas from Northern Triangle is very low. It has declined somewhat over the years. It's thus, I believe, would be the only solution given the kind of pressure we have on the asylum system. It takes many years to actually get an asylum. It takes many months to even get an asylum appointment. So all of us were advocating for a more open border, and I do advocate for an open border. If we, with the kind of enforcement that we have currently, all of them get to the asylum system, we are basically thinking that people will get asylum, but then get mixed with the rest of the society as undocumented immigrants. I don't think that's a good solution. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Professor Kaushal. You made very interesting comments regarding the discussion. especially because it is very challenging, but very valuable at the same time to try to rethink what Donald Trump is all about. It's not only basically policy, but the image and perceptions. And I believe he managed himself basically at the level of perceptions. But I also believe that it is very important for us Mexicans to review what has happened to the U.S. visa system since COVID-19, because well, you cannot imagine what is happening since COVID and after COVID. It might take you more than a year for a renewal of your visa, and this has created, in fact, a sort of a black market, corruption in terms of different agencies that can help you to get the appointment in fewer months instead of waiting for a year, no? But anyway, I think that is a key point for us to give a focal discussion regarding what is also going on there. We have Camelia now, Camelia, which is also the editor of this volume, and she will wrap up the session. But Camelia, who all of us have been realizing, she is very, very young and very enthusiastic. She's a full-time tenure professor at CISAN UNAM. She got her PhD at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, a PhD on social and political sciences. We are very proud that a very beautiful girl from Romania decided to move down to Mexico and pursue her PhD at UNAM and married a Mexican. So she has double nationality, right, Camelia? Now yes. You are also Mexican,
yes,
no?
I'm Mexican.
Yeah, so that was important for me to highlight here. So anyway, she has been doing a lot of work on migration. Basically, she has been focusing on highly skilled migration, but she also participates as a very active member and as the regional vice president of the Global Research Forum on Diasporas and Transnationalism, the GRFDT in India. And as I said, she is an expert in skilled migration, but also in scientific diplomacy and Canadian studies. So please, Camelia, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for such a warm introduction. And I'm really thankful to be here today. Of course, I would like to start by thanking all of you who are present, and to thank Monica for inviting me to this project. It was really great to work with her. Sylvia for her support at UNAM Los Angeles. We didn't expect it, but it came along and it came very well, nicely. So we now have an ebook also. And of course, I would like to thank my colleagues at CISAN and the style editors for this volume. Our reviewers, anonymous reviewers, they are always very helpful. Our discussants today, Professor Raj is not here anymore, but she will hear us from YouTube, and also Professor Niraj. So we started this project 2 years ago, which is kind of a fast track project for an academic book. You know, it normally takes longer. So we've great expectations. We started, no? We started thinking about what Biden bring to the US for us as Mexicans, inside Mexico also, no? And also with great expectations from the authors. And I think nobody mentioned the names of the authors till now, but I will do it because we have really great experts. Of course, the book starts with the introductory chapter by Monica Brea. And then we have Tony Bayan from the Rice University, the Center for Mexican Studies. And then we have my own chapter. I will talk about it in a minute. And we have Jorge Santibáñez from the Mexa Institute. You have heard and maybe read him, and Arcelia Serrano. Then we have a chapter on asylum by Nicole Hallat and Angela Remus. And lastly, we have a chapter by Enrique Camacho Beltran, who is a philosopher and gives a sort of a different view on migration. So it is a very complete book. It's it's short, maybe 6 chapters, but I think it's enough to translate this tradition of the first 100 days of a president in power that we have they have in the US. What can he bring? What is he expected? We don't have this tradition as much in Mexico. We try to sort of make a correspondence. This is a tradition that comes, of course, from the media. It has maybe almost 100 years in the US since the President Roosevelt in 1933. Of course, the first months in power are in these first 3 months, 100 days in power, a president is usually still popular with the public and lawmakers who often have incentives to cooperate with its new leader, creating opportunities for a president to pass major legislation. I'm quoting from a work of Kelly. So this is why this media catchphrase is also translated into a useful period of analysis. Since we started the project, a lot has been written on Biden, and not so much about his first 100 days, but then, of course, we have prospective techniques we use in social sciences, and this tradition of the 100 days is also a prospective technique. What would the president bring? The first 100 days serve as a sort of a warning model for what would come. Biden's first actions were interpreted in the historical context of the systemic character of the migration policy, about which both Professor Raj and Niraj talked. And we also try to deal with the limitations of what a president can do, and the difference between planning and action, which is quite big sometimes. This was the idea of the book. We made a seminar. We had more participants in the seminar than in this book. I think maybe the seminar is still available online. And we identified major restrictive trends in the US migration policy that are not correlated with the transition from one administration to another, not with a particular party in power. We actually think that the US immigration system is quite restrictive. It allows for exchange of, as Professor Ellis Shahar here at the University of Toronto, where I am now, says, the exchange of skills for citizenship. So it privileges certain types of migrants over other migrants. And we have tried to put into context this global trend in a globalized way of doing migration politics, where the slowdown in the world economy has also contributed to maintaining this low-cost immigration labor force. So we try to sort of contextualize this machinery of the US immigration system, about which Doris Meissner has also written. How can workers be recognized, maintain their rights, attain citizenship, etc. The book has, as I said, 9 offers. We have offers mainly from Mexico and the US. So in So We're Doing, we try to complement this global view on the US immigration, and in particular on how the US immigration policy reflects this certain global trend and cultural perspective. What I talk about in my own chapter, which is called Friends on Other Continents, Representations of Biden's Migration Diplomacy Outside the Americas. I analyze this migration diplomacy that Biden proposed, like to restore the image of the US abroad. And I take into account Europe, Asia, and the Middle East for my analysis. Some of the first actions undertook by Joe Biden in the first 3 months as a president may be analyzed as an effort to reposition the US as a multilateral partner and to deprovincialize the American perspective on immigration. In this way, Biden, we could say, he tried to promote his country as a moral, cultural, and scientific power, but also to reestablish broken relations with certain parts of the world, certain countries, Muslim countries, Central America, India also, that had been damaged by his previous administration. Some titles in the media at the time when he entered into power, they said, "America is back." For instance, Reuters title was saying, "Biden touts muscular foreign policy in his first diplomatic speech." And such was the situation that Biden was called the migration president, as you recall, and a president who repairs damage. So he tried to recover from this state of exceptionality during the pandemic. He tried to restore hope, promoting the US image as a welcoming nation, but also he was characterized from certain black spots or say failures. Failed migration governments, the relations he was proposing with Russia, Cuba, and Central America, they were not positively, described. So Biden, even his image included his wife, who was very friendly to migrants, as opposed to the other, the previous presidency couple. He was conceived as decent, disciplined. He was somebody who would reinstall the attraction of skilled migration and skilled refugee system. So this anti-discrimination discourse on migration is reproduced as a way to put an end to Trump's war of words. And this is valid all over in the media globally. And then there came the black spots. Like when we enter the new phase in his presidency, we see that actions such as adding Cuba on the terrorist list or the failed governance to Central America allowed for a more pessimistic approach, which is more present today. He was even accused of migrant abuse because certain measures of not choosing not to prevent certain people from being called at the border or making people wait, this chronopolitics of waiting. And also, of course, he was accused of lack of power because of his age, because of creating false expectations towards migrants. But as my colleague Niraj said, actually, what can be reached in a system that is not really governed by a president? So there are also limitations to what a president can do. So these are some of the lines, the research lines that are taken by the book. We also found this this process where the media portrayed Biden in a certain way in the US, and then in the Indian or Middle Eastern countries, they quoted from the US media. So there was this intermediate quoting that, with the media that didn't do original research, rather they circulated the same information in the US and abroad. So it was a very beautiful project. I hope we continue, of course. Migration is a very nice lens to look at the US image at a macro and micro level in foreign media. What can be done in terms of foreign policy and migration challenges. I have written all the suggestions and possibly new tasks for analysis. One of the tasks for a future book will be the scenarios. Like we could continue with a comparative study of like the last 100 days in power of the president, in order to look at this medium-term impact of his discourse and action and diplomacy. So thank you so much, everyone. And if you have comments or questions, you're welcome. And also, please feel free to read the book. It will be available online, and I think it can also be bought on paper at CISAN headquarters. That is in Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Camelia. I take this time to congratulate you both. This is you did a great job. Unfortunately, the other authors are not here, but please tell them that we all enjoy this work, and I really wish that you will be able to follow up many of the comments given in this session. There is one question from Ricardo de Rosenzweig. I would have to say that Ricardo de Rosenzweig is a student. Well, no, he was my student at UNAM, and he did a wonderful thesis on development. But anyway, he was able to make it to Los Angeles, and he's currently working as a team partner at UNAM Los Angeles. And he has one question for both of you. I wonder if you can take the question just to finish the session from Ricardo, and after his question, we will close the session. Is that okay, Monica and Camelia?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, Ricardo, please.
Thank you, Silvia. It's my pleasure being here, and of course, apologize for not putting my camera, but anyway, I'm just gonna make this question and congratulate you for this excellent presentation, book presentation. So my question is, well, it's kind of a dilemma for long-term period about this phenomenon, this migration process. And migration is natural to human nature. I remember once philosopher Noah Harari once said, if evolution makes it possible, then it's also natural. So the evolution of the state and their laws had made illegal immigration impossible, but yet it is in our nature to migrate. So what will be to the discussions. Your inputs regarding this natural process, this natural human behavior in facing the modern state machinery. Is this modern state machinery going against our own nature? And lastly, how do you think if Biden's agenda, President Biden is addressing this dilemma? Does he seems like something natural, or also like Trump sees like something that needs to be, I don't know, addressed in some other way? Thank you very much for this space. Thank you, Silvia.
Please, Monica.
Okay. Well, you made a difficult question, but an interesting one. I think Biden has a lot of challenges to deal with this huge phenomena, because I don't want to call it a problem, although it has become a problem for the managing of migration. Republicans are very severe against how he has managed the migration flows. And even though he thinks it's a human nature to migrate if you do not desire to stay in your country, but it's difficult to manage either as a expulsion country or a receiving country. You have to put laws in order not to be. You have to put laws. It's the nature of a state to establish regulatory laws to welcome some of your migratory flows and not welcome others that you don't need. Asylum is a very delicate question. It's a very delicate matter because most of the immigration system has failed in asylum. We have the U.S. has like 1.9 million persons waiting in courts, either for deportation issues or for asylum seekers. And it takes like 2, 3, 4 years to resolve those matters. So this is an issue which is very tremendous, but it's not. It was inherited to Biden. He didn't create it. It was the heredity of many governments. So it is a very difficult stance, and Biden has tried, but Republicans are really very strong and very. His rhetoric has damaged the Biden administration.
Thank you, Monica. Camelia, please.
Yes, it's a very interesting question, and of course I like it. Actually, there are 2 questions, right? The migration made impossible by the state, I would just say that not all migration is made impossible by the state. There is literature on athlete migration. We are now at the World Cup, right? So this type of migration is very welcome. The millionaires migration is very welcome. So the states try to make it difficult for people who may not contribute, but it is important for us as scholars to show that eventually all migrants contribute with something in the whole society. So as it became clear with the pandemics, where agricultural workers were blamed for many things before the pandemics, then they turned into essential workers and got a permit to stay in the US, exactly. And I don't know if migration is always natural to the human nature. It should be free, but we have lots of crises, and we have a crisis now in the 21st century that we didn't expect to have. So we are talking here about the problem of forced migration. When people have to leave and they are not protected in other countries, what happens? That is the problem. And that is where the question of humanitarianism should enter into account to make states more aware, because states are institutions, and institutions are made alive by people. So that's why we have to change this way of seeing migration. And this is sort of a broader view on the topic that you asked about. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Camelia. So I guess it is time for us to close the session. I take the opportunity to wish you all the gorgeous winter or summer holidays whenever you are located in this crazy world. And I look forward to continue collaborating with Monica and Camelia now that I'm going back to my home at CISAN, La Torre dos Humanidades. Thank you to our audience. I see Professor David Moguel around here from CISON, and we will invite Professor David Moguel to work with us. He's a great colleague. Their parents, his parents come from Merida, but he was born in the United States. Anyway, so thank you all. Un abrazo por las fiestas, and congratulations again for this wonderful job you did together.
Thank you so much. Gracias.
Gracias, thank you.
Gracias, gracias. También al equipo técnico, por favor, tanto de el CISAN como de la UNAM Los Ángeles. Un abrazo. Chao.
Bye.
Gracias. Hasta luego. Goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.